Welcome to Processing Purpose, a business and lifestyle podcast committed to having honest conversations about the stuff in our lives that is often suppressed, ignored, or overlooked. We are two brothers from very different backgrounds, but with one common goal. From entrepreneurship to relationships, from hobbies to house projects, nothing is off limits as we process becoming the best version of ourselves in business and life. We're back!
We're back.
Hello.
Number 11?
Number 11. We're going to go a little different this week, huh?
We are. We got a good friend in the house.
We have a
Not
special
just a friend, a family member.
Yeah. And actually,
Both.
another brother-in-law. Mm-hmm. This is a room of brother-in-laws.
It is.
But the other brother-in-law has not been invited.
He has not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure that's known.
Yeah. And I can't promise he will.
No.
Sorry, dude. I'm not a part of any of this. Sorry, Tyler.
Today we have the pleasure of inviting, as our first guest on the Processing Purpose podcast, my brother-in-law, amazing friend, humble human being, father of three, former professional soccer player, current head coach for a university in Portland. My brother-in-law, Troy Reedy. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We got some round of applause in the background. He's the man. And
Like one of those sitcom shows?
Yeah, you're supposed to hit the cheering button.
I know. Too bad we don't have that set up. We need to think about that.
Yeah.
But also a great leader.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's kind of the direction we want to go today a little bit, is in the leadership vein. You know, leadership can be a really broad topic, right? Mm-hmm. And it can go a number of different ways. And I don't want to just be like, today we're talking about leadership, but I want to talk about leadership today as it relates to kind of leading our kids, leading our families. You know, maybe if we get there, maybe we'll touch on some of the coaching aspects and kind of how those things play. But as kind of a way to get us started here, what in your guys' both of you, I want answers from both of you guys, what does leadership actually mean? When someone says, hey, you're a leader, does that just mean that you're ahead of a bunch of people that's following you? Like, what is leadership?
Yeah. You want to start with that? Want to kick that off?
Yeah, because you're gonna take the better answer probably. Mine is succinct. When I think about leadership, it's as simple as the ability to influence.
Yes.
And obviously, there can be very healthy influence and really negative influence. But I think at a core level, it's probably, the capacity to influence others.
Yeah. That's a great, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, John Maxwell says, leadership is influence.
Okay.
Nothing more, nothing less.
I think he got that from me.
He did.
So I don't know how old he is.
But he picked that up from you.
Yeah.
I love that. And leadership can be, it's multidimensional. Obviously, it is influence. Mm-hmm. Do you find that leadership changes, evolves, depending on, like, let's think about it this way. If you were leading a nonprofit, right, and you're dealing with a bunch of volunteers versus you're the CEO of a corporation in which people are paid to be there, like, or you got 3 kids, right, and you're trying to lead the family unit. Yeah. How does leadership change? What do you think, Gavin? Is leadership, do you always operate with the same principles, or is it different as you move through things? Yeah,
for me personally, I think there's a baseline of character when it comes to leadership. But yeah, I mean, the world's a stage and everyone's an actor. So, I mean, you can morph yourself into whatever type of leader you want to become. But ultimately, I think influence is the best definition. But to take it a little bit further, I would say example, being the example. And so I think you can lead more with just your character than with your words alone. Just by being yourself, getting up every day, getting after it, and showing people how to do it, not just telling people how to do it.
Yes.
I think is the difference maker. And I think that's true for your employees, your kids, your team, your players. All of those things matter when it comes to character.
What do you think, Troy? How does and let's relate it directly to this current moment for you. Like, how does And I recognize that as leaders, sometimes we don't process it in terms of like how am I going to lead today? It's
Sure.
just kind of what you do and what we kind of are. But how do you find leadership changing, if you can even contextualize it that way, between leading your kids on the soccer field and leading your boys at home?
Yeah, I think, like Gavin said, there's definitely a core element to your character and who you are that's going to transcend whatever context you're in, but certainly a differentiation between how do I approach and how do I motivate college soccer players, many of which want to keep playing at the highest level and want to be driven and want to be pushed, versus my 9-year-old,
Right.
who may just want a game of ping pong and not want to be pushed to be, Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Right. You're a development guy. How do you know how hard to push?
Oh my. Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think people that know me know that, when I was 5 years old, there was an innate desire to try to play at the highest level, meaning I was waking up before elementary school, first grade, and running my own training sessions in the backyard.
And no one was leading you to do
No
that.
one was
You
leading
just
me.
did it.
Yeah. Neither of my parents had soccer backgrounds.
Did you get that example from another player that you looked up to?
I don't think so. No,
Man.
it was
Okay.
just something in
in
there
you.
that kind of, all the way, and I could ad nauseum talk about the different crazy things that I did throughout elementary and junior high and high school. But, there was a lot of Friday nights where, when friends are out, I'm watching cassette tapes of old World Cup games and taking notes, and
Wow.
Was it
just
your...
very, very driven. Very, very driven. So there was never a pushing.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that's wrong. I think it's probably case by case, and there's variables to that. But I get that question a lot from people that know me. Like, do you want your kids to be professional athletes? And yeah, I don't know if I have an answer, because on one hand, I certainly don't resonate with driving kids into something that maybe they don't find life in.
Right.
But then there's also the other side of, there's just something about the process of pursuing excellence and the grind and the grit to move forward in whatever discipline, that I think then translates to so much of life, that you don't necessarily get that if you're just dabbling in this and dabbling in that. And so I don't have an answer, but it is, like, I certainly long for my kids in particular to find something eventually where there's a desire and a drive that creates intangible things that don't happen in other ways other than that pursuit of excellence and next level,
So it's not so much then, and I agree. It's not so much then deciding how much you're going to push somebody. It's how much are they going to push themselves.
Yeah.
And facilitating that, knowing that that's coming from in them, and then helping them leverage that, and maybe redirecting where that needs to go so that they're getting the biggest bang for the buck.
Right.
But letting that be presented to you first before you trying to pull them on that journey.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's being a learner and watching and identifying where they're at in terms of their own drive, but then, sort of like the 10,000 hour rule and the different, I forget the actual term, but like the proper type of practice where you're not just doing the things you already know how to do, but it's that little bit further that's out of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
I forget the terminology within, some famous
Sure.
book. But yeah, identifying where's this person at, and then how can you be just a little bit ahead to draw them a little bit further.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I flashed on something, so I'm going to go down this lane since I thought about it. With one of the primary roles as an employer / leader is identifying the best place for your players to play. You know, in other words, whether I'm hiring, you know, a salesperson, or I'm hiring backroom development or an assistant, helping them figure out what their superpower is, and then putting them in a position to crush it. I can see that being very relevant to the soccer field.
100%.
Recognizing when this person is a striker versus this person's better on the defensive end. Talk to me about that, like an observation. How do you help identify what somebody's strength is so that you can then empower them to be the best version of themselves?
Good question.
I'm probably going to go deeper into the soccer side of things than you want.
No, I think it's all relative. Yeah.
No, I
relevant.
I would say soccer is unique in that it's probably less specialized than certain sports like football, where it's going to be hard to convert a quarterback into a linebacker.
Sure.
Whereas other than a goalkeeper, which is a very specialized position, so my current context, I don't necessarily have the luxury, and I don't even know if I did have the luxury, if I would do this, to where we play a particular system and I'm recruiting, we lost our striker. I need a striker. There are coaches and systems where they coach a particular way, and this is the player we lost, this is the player we need.
Yeah.
Again, part of that is I just, within my context, I don't have the luxury of just focusing that much on finding the guy for the position. So I've always just looked for, I'm going to get the best soccer players that I can sign.
Yeah.
And then we will build the system according to the strengths of the group. Beyond that, we've had like major success in bringing in players who their whole lives have played a particular position.
Sure.
And kind of morphing them and coaching them to play a different way that then they, you know, where they may have been successful in a certain spot on the field, they've been all conference or all American players. And so that, from a coaching standpoint, that's the fun part for me. Every preseason is like, all these little new toys to play with. And how do we get the most, not just out of the player, but out of the group as a whole? So I'm already thinking, you know, one of our best players, I'm thinking about playing him in a place he's probably never played next year now, to get the most out of him.
What'd you observe? Is that through observation? You watched him perform in a certain way, and when he did that, he did really well. Because that's what we have to do from the employing standpoint, is we can hire for a specific position,
right,
based on a resume, right, based on prior experience. But then you'll get them in that role, and you're like, that might not be the best play for you.
Sure.
So was it through observation that you saw that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Enough. Enough. Seeing him in enough situations where he's just capable to play anywhere and everywhere, and then from the sporting side, but I'm sure would translate to the business world as well, is saying like, how do we make him as much front and center as possible?
Yeah. Because
the whole of the group, or the whole of the business, I suppose, like, if he has the ball more, then the team is going to be far more successful.
Yeah. As we think about leadership and roles and this is interesting how this is going to dovetail, but you know, you're specifically helping soccer players find out positions. And you're doing that through a little bit of observation, maybe a little bit of experimentation.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's see. Ooh, that didn't work. Let's move that guy.
Yeah.
If we pivot that to the family unit and we think about our kids and coming back to hoping they'll find something that the drive to pursue it comes from within. As parents, how do we help them experiment with this position, right?
Sure.
In air quotes, So as I think about it with my kids, it's like, well, I want them to try this activity and this activity, get feedback, less about how they performed in it and more about how they felt doing it, is my observation of it.
Yeah.
But how does that play in helping our kids find their superpowers as it relates to helping our soccer players find theirs and employees find theirs? Because like you, I've got 3 young kids.
Yeah.
And I desperately want to help them find something that they just, they just can't get enough of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it just experimentation? Is it like, I don't know, what, have you thought about it at all?
Yeah. Do you have any initial thoughts,
Well,
Gavin?
it's a great question, and it's
it is.
interesting because I think it can change from season to season too. So, right, like you have little kids, and they may be super into something now,
Sure,
but always keeping that philosophy of, hey, stay open, allow them to navigate, allow them to get excited on their own. But like you had mentioned before in a previous podcast, always make sure that you allow the experience to be a fun one, right? So if you start to feel them 30 minutes in go, oh, I'm tired of this, stop it, right? Walk away from that, start something else. I think it's really important to let them guide themselves through their own interests. But
at the same time, without letting them quit though also, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a season of like, we're going to do this for the next 6 weeks, the next 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, we can decide, is this something I want to do again?
We don't ever quit. My whole upbringing, it was that way, right?
Yeah.
Once you start, you finish what you start. If you're done at the end of the season and you want to do something else, great. My parents never let me quit, and I never will let my kids quit halfway through something. Just won't.
So our youngest, Tanner,
Yeah.
Who will probably listen to this because he loves the podcast, and it's Uncle Luke and Uncle Gavin.
It's awesome.
Is gifted in many ways. He, for the last 6 months or so, he wanted a drum set, and we had already seen just in listening to music, like he's got rhythm. He's very good hand-eye coordination and has music in him. And so we got a drum set. It's in the room right next to my wife and I's bedroom, which is not the most strategic placement.
Strategic was the last episode.
Okay, yeah, I missed that one. But we just started him maybe 3 months ago into drumming lessons.
Okay.
And it has been a little bit of a trying to identify, how do I unlock, because what he loves to do is go into his bedroom and put on headphones and listen to music and drum along and just free drum and go, and he's good at that, and that is really life-giving for him. But the drumming instructor also is saying, like, you have to do these fundamental sticking patterns.
Sure.
And I know it's not fun per se, but this will serve you long term. It's been really hard to keep Tanner motivated to do the drumming patterns and the things each week that he's given. And we've had a lot of conversations because he's like, well, maybe I should. What if we did drumming lessons once a week instead of once every other week? And tenderly trying to say it is not the lesson itself
Right.
that is going to move you forward. It's the discipline of doing what the specialist, the coach is telling you to do, that will then unlock more freedom for you when you do we've tried to figure out, like, I've tried to figure out, hey, what you should do is just set a timer, do 15 minutes of the discipline sticking, and then turn that music on and go.
Yeah.
Now, it hasn't actually really worked. So that's, when you talk about, okay, so I have to adjust and morph and figure out how do I, and I'm not his drumming coach,
sure,
but I'm his parent, and I see a gift and I see a passion, but I also understand enough to where, man, if he's going to be good, and if he's probably going to even enjoy this more, you have to put in some of the work.
Right.
And so how do I unlock that in him to where it resonates with him? I don't know.
Is there... I deal with the same thing with... I'm a race coach. We haven't really talked about that on the podcast yet, but during the ski season.
Yeah, why not?
It hasn't really come up, and we've talked about my skiing background,
Right.
periodically, but I'm a former alpine racer, and this year my kids got involved in alpine racing here at our local resort, and I was one of the coaches, and so I had 7, 8, and 9-year-olds this year, which our kids are right in the thick of that. Your boys are on the just slightly older, but right in the middle of that. And what I found is getting them to do drill. They just want to go ski.
Yeah.
But very much the same. Getting them to do drills is boring.
Mm-hmm.
Getting them to go ski is easy. Okay, so it's kind of the sticking,
Right.
techniques versus just going and doing the drumming.
Yeah.
What I tried to do is, and I'm sure you guys have done this, but I've tried to connect the drill to the why.
Yeah.
Here's the drill. Here's what we're going to do. Now here's why we're doing it. And this is going to relate to this, and it's going to help you do this.
Right.
And I got less pushback.
Okay.
But I still got pushback.
Yeah.
And so that was the background to my thought here is I feel like there needs to be some sort of age of responsibility where younger, you just kind of have to push the narrative because it's within them. Like, hey, this is something that we have to do. We just got to go do this.
Yeah.
And then at some point they kind of come to an age of more responsibility and ownership where you kind of put it on them going, look, if you want to be better, this is what you have to do. I feel like for 7, 8, 9, I had to push. They're not going to go do it on their own.
Yeah.
So how does that land with you? Does that feel contextual? Does that?
For sure. And I mean, as you're sharing that, I wonder even if part of, when you think about leadership, a buzz phrase term or a critical part is like vision casting, right?
Sure.
And so in some ways, when I'm envisioning you trying to connect drilling to the why, maybe part of how successful you are in getting kids or soccer players or employees is how well are you able to inspire and motivate and bring passion to like, oh yeah, like I want that.
I want to be a part of this team.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of whatever it is you're creating.
And I think everyone thirsts for greatness, right? Everyone wants to be great at what they do. Nobody aims to be average at anything.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a book, and a dad and a son were talking, and the dad was explaining to the son what it takes to be great, what kind of work ethic you have to have. You got to get up every day and do the things you don't want to do. And his son looked at him and he said, well, Dad, I don't want to do those things. And he said, look, son, that's fine. A lot of people don't want to do those things, but those people are average. And there's a lot of them, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But if that's what your aim is, keep doing that. But if you want to be great, it's going to take a little extra. And this is how you do it. And I thought, it's not that challenging, right? It's pretty simple to step forward and do those little extra things every single day. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. One of my favorite quotes is, successful people are the people that do all the things that unsuccessful people are unwilling to do.
Yeah.
Right. And those are the things that I think, again, back to example and character, is showing your kids this is how it's done. I remember asking you one time, I was thinking about exiting entrepreneurship. I was like, man, maybe I'm just going to go get a lending job, or I don't know, just get a 9 to 5. I'm sick of this.
I remember we were talking about it.
Yep. And I said, Luke, does it really make a difference? Your kids watching you build a business, grow a business. I mean, do they even care? And you leaned in. I've never seen you look more serious with
like you poked the bear.
Fierce eyes of a real. And he goes, it makes all the difference. And I went, okay, I guess I'm going to stay in this lane. But it was so healthy and so good. And it was such a great self-check in realizing that I want to be great at what I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be average. That's not a part of my story.
Yeah.
The other piece, which is related to the most recent question you asked.
Yeah.
Is I find even at the flow of a high level soccer training session is often kind of warm up. You have a topic for the day, you warm up, you enter into a technical piece where you're refining technique. Hopefully that's related to the topic, and then it kind of expands from there, from small-sided things that then ultimately get you to the game. You play the game. When you're playing against opponents, that's what counts, not the warm-up. And the technical piece, there's very few players, right? And I was one of them, because I'm the guy that liked to get up at,
But you're the anomaly.
But I'm the anomaly that enjoyed the technical piece. Most players, it's okay, this is part of the deal, drilling. And what I found, and again, probably there's ways to relate it to the business team world, is when I get the most out of players in those technical pieces, it is finding ways to make it fun and competitive.
Yeah.
So something is
gamifying it.
Yes.
Great word.
Something as simple as, a diamond passing pattern that we may do just to get the pattern of movement. Then, we have 2 grids going, and all right, whoever can complete 50 passes faster than the other team, and all of a sudden you just see the intensity go up. Or in relay races, that it's like, okay, these guys are college guys, but they're, giggling and yelling and hooting and hollering about, we just won the relay race. It's just amazing, just the competitiveness, but it's also fun and gamified.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
As it relates to drumming with your youngest, I wonder if we put it in terms of gamifying that.
Yeah.
Right? And kind of the arc of what we've been talking about. 2 things that popped into my head is, one, is there a way that the instructor could take the sticking pattern and connect it with music that he likes to listen to and go, this that I'm trying to teach you, he's using it right here.
Right.
So that he can see the why.
Right.
And then the other piece that popped into my head was, is there an app that he can use on his iPad that he could gamify the sticking? So that we do that with the piano. Our kids here have apps on the piano, and they have to hit the right keys, and it can hear. The app can hear what you're doing, and you're gamifying the process. And I'm wondering if you could, if there's an app out there to do the sticking and gamify it along with it, and he can connect it to the music that he's wanting to play. The vision.
Yeah, totally.
The vision casting.
If there's not an app, Luke will probably create it at the end of recording this, right?
Making a note right now. Yeah.
I got a decent question to throw out there.
Shoot.
How do you guys share leadership?
I'll go a little bit deeper. I'm not sure what you mean.
With your spouses, how do you identify leaders in your own circles? You have 9 assistant coaches. How do you share that leadership with them, right?
Like pass it on or delegate and work together in a leadership context?
It is a pretty broad question. Delegate or maybe even find others that have leadership qualities that you don't to make up the difference, right? Finding people that can fill the gaps for your weaknesses, things like that. But oftentimes I feel leaders have a hard time sharing leadership, right? Once they're at the top and they're at the apex of their career, they go, this feels pretty good. I don't want to share any of this with anybody. I'm going to call the shots. I'm going to tell you what to do. And that's the way it's going to go. And I feel like when that happens, egomania starts to take over, right? So how do you stay healthy as a leader and share, delegate, develop, things like that? Identify leaders within your circle. How do you do all that effectively? There's a lot there. Sorry, I probably opened up too much. But how do you go about that? As a leader, how do you help other leaders be leaders? That's probably the better question.
Well, so there is a lot there. I'm trying to think. At least half of my 9 assistant coaches are players that came through the program that then wanted to get into coaching.
Love that.
And we have a context with 55 to 60 players where we actually have 2 groups, the conference playing group and then more of a reserve developmental group. So one is there's a great context for them to get their feet wet into coaching.
By the way, that group never existed before you came, right?
Correct.
You've developed a second group of soccer players that don't even get playing time, and they're still there to be around you.
Yeah, well,
That's awesome.
Yes, but I would say to be around the culture as a whole and the other, everything
comes back to the vision casting, right?
Yeah. But it is remarkable. We may have 8 goalkeepers next year, which is crazy. There's one goalkeeper that plays, and we likely will have 8. But I think when you have, this is maybe another topic, but when you're talking about a culture that people want to be a part of, they will sacrifice, like, I actually don't care if I'm the guy or not, or if I play or not. This is where I want to be. Right. But in terms of, I think one of the things you touched on was the challenge to delegate and hand off when you know that the quality may not be as good. And where our season is short, every session is critical. And so especially with the first team, it would be hard for me and for the success of that group to just be like, hey, try it out. So it's trying to find context where where you are giving space for learning and growth. And I don't do this like 100% intentionally all the time, but there's an acronym MAWL, MAWL.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's multiple that kind of communicate similar things, but it's in the way of leadership. Modeling is the M. So you're modeling, and this is where my players saw for years. Right. It modeled. Then the A is assist. You're assisting that person in the development of the session or the pitch to the prospective donors or whatever the business situation is. Assisting that person. Then you're taking the step back to watch them. You're not jumping in. You're just watching. And then finally the L is you're leaving and they're on their own. And I don't think about that intentionally in everything that I do, but I think that from parenting to developing coaches to that tends to be a pretty successful model, especially when and I think that helps to counteract some of the this isn't going to be run as well if they're right. But when it's part of a process to move that person forward, then okay, I can handle this being less than, because ultimately we're going to develop better coaches for the comprehensive good of the program, if that makes sense.
One thing I really currently struggle with is expecting people in my world, especially other leaders, to learn the same way I learn. And when they don't, I get really frustrated. I very much live by that. I told you once, what am I telling you this again for? Like, I don't need to tell you twice.
Right.
That's crazy, right? I mean, most people need a little bit more assistance in developing them into who you really want them to be professionally or personally or whatever else. So that's where I currently struggle. I need help and strength with assisting and just being patient and taking time and being methodical about what I'm trying to get out of this person for them, not just for me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and there is a balance there, because you can tell someone the same. I've told you, if I tell you this 5 times, okay, you're not getting this.
Right.
So I either need to change how I'm instructing, or I'm identifying through awareness that this particular piece isn't your superpower and you shouldn't be responsible of this.
Sure.
And we're going to pivot you to this lane instead of that lane. So I think there's a balance there. There's a balance between yourself and making sure you're doing what you need to do to empower them to do the job that you've given them to do. But at some point as well, they have to take ownership, pick it up, and do it the best that they can. And if that's not good enough, as the leader, it's your job to say, it's not good enough. Even if that's not what you're telling them, you're going to pivot their responsibility to something else that they are going to be great at.
Yeah.
And you're not, and here's what I found. Every time that happens, and it happens, they go, oh, thank God, I hated doing that.
Wow. And you're like, oh, why didn't you say something?
Right? Yeah. And you're like, okay, I'm glad and typically the conversation goes like this. Here's what I'm observing.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like we're not quite getting to the level that I know you're expecting of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How would it feel if I took that responsibility off your plate?
Hmm.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
There we go.
And I'll bring somebody in to do that piece.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
is that somewhat experimental though? Meaning like it's also a challenge trying to find what new lane for them to be in, right? Like you're kind of guessing like, oh, maybe this, maybe that. So
yeah, or you're not gonna. I mean, at the end of the day, there may be people, right, that just
aren't a good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's the crappy part of being a
Right.
leader as well,
Yeah.
is when you have
Sure.
to, for the good of the team and the vision,
Yeah.
you have to part ways.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but that's just a function
Uh-huh.
of whether that's the athlete on the
Sure.
field
Yeah.
that goes to B team instead of the traveling team,
Yeah.
or a coach or an employee.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could do it as a parent. Sometimes you're just not cutting it. But it's different, right? When you're
But
a parent.
you're willing to be fluid and
Yeah.
look for and identify, is there a way to make it work?
Yeah.
I think is what I'm hearing you say.
If there's a way to keep, if you see talent in them,
Yes. Yeah.
if you see, I'm a big believer in you hire character, not skills.
Mm-hmm.
I can teach skills.
Mm-hmm.
I can't teach character.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a short
quickly,
window.
Yeah.
those are
Right.
the things your parents teach you.
That's
Yeah.
a long arc.
Yeah.
Right? That's a 10-year learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a this season learn.
Sure.
Right.
And so I hire character and teach skills. And so as long as the person earnestly wants to be there
Mm-hmm.
and has the right character, I'll find something for them to do
Yeah.
as to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
So then when it's not conditional and it's based on, or it's not based on performance, I should say, when it's your kids,
Yeah.
how do you handle it then? Do you focus more on character development than you do skill development? In other words, like we tell our kids 4 or 5 times all the time. Like that's part of it, and we have to stay patient and understanding and all that. And their performance somewhat doesn't matter, right? They're not getting paid by us. They don't have to show up for
You
work.
haven't traded any of your kids in or fired them?
This whole child labor law thing is ruining this country. I'm just kidding. No, but I do wonder, how do you guys approach that? How do you approach your children when it comes to, helping them build new life skills and developing them and those sorts of things?
I actually think it's the mall. Is that what you said, Troy?
Yeah.
I actually think it's the same in that capacity because, and this is a big thing that I see leaders do is they abdicate, they don't delegate. And abdication is, here's responsibility, go figure it out, let me know how it goes. I see this all the time in my agency because I'm dealing with operators of businesses, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I hired a marketing person and it didn't work out. And it's like, how much marketing do you know? Oh, I don't know any. That's why I hired them.
Right.
So how'd you know they were doing the right things? I don't. So were they the right things or were they the wrong things? I actually don't know. I just know it didn't work.
Right.
And that's abdication. Delegation is when you teach somebody how to do it.
Right.
Right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily proficient.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing them in to be better than you anyways.
Yeah.
But as it relates to kids, as it relates to employees, I love that acronym, Troy. I'm going to use that. I do the same thing. I just never had an acronym for it.
Sure.
You're going to watch me do it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do it together. And then I'm going to watch you do it.
Yeah.
And then you're going to do it and report back.
Yeah.
That's the way we've done it, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
those 4 stages.
Yeah, for sure.
But I honestly think with kids, it's the same. And I think whether that's, have you ever seen a kid try and clean up spilled milk or water with a paper towel? Right? They swirl it. Right? They have no concept. And this is just an example of the greater arc of trying to teach them something, right?
Yeah.
They have no concept on how to clean up milk or water or anything. They just spread it around. Right? That's because you never showed them how to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
We have to go and do it together. And I think with kids, you have to go do it together many times before they're actually doing it on their own.
Right.
Right? It's like trying to teach my son, my oldest, who's 10, how to get the dishes in the dishwasher so that they'll actually get clean.
Right.
Like putting a cup upside down instead of right side up. If you've never been shown that, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And we hold our kids, we hold our employees, we hold our athletes sometimes to an expectation that's unfair because they didn't know. Classic example. So, I'm an alpine coach. Yeah. I was helping with a race this weekend. They put me in a position that I'd never been in this weekend. I'm not going to go through all the context of it. I was the finish line coach.
Okay.
So I'm supposed to greet all the athletes. I'd never been the finish line coach before. And I stepped in it. Not with our athletes, but in the world of racing, you have kind of those are facilitating, and then you have the officiating, what they call the jury side of it, which is the sport legality of it to make sure that it meets the result requirements, the point requirements, etc.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole officiating side that's separate than the coaching side. And I got my nose involved in things that I was just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
And I got my butt chewed out. But I was never told where my guardrails of what I was supposed to do and not do. I was just trying to be helpful. And man, am I guilty of that with my kids.
Yeah. Sure. Wow. Good. Good example.
Go clean that up. And then we're like, that's not clean compared to my standard. Right? But we haven't necessarily communicated what that standard looks like to them 5 times. We only did it twice. Right? And there's a bit of that.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's my thought there.
That's a great thought. And I think it's very concrete when you're thinking about, life skills related to how do you properly load the dishwasher.
Right.
But it also, the same principle in terms of how do you communicate with your sibling when you've hurt them? And, some of the,
softer skills maybe.
Yeah, character, the long
Yes.
arc of development versus, it's going to be important to load a dishwasher the right way. But really, if we're taking a step back, I think we would all say the more important things of life and development are those character pieces. And that, that's the long arc as well of modeling how those conversations go. And maybe it's, I think sometimes, right, and there's different contexts, but sometimes it's parents that will remove themselves from the kids to talk through conflict. Oh, we don't want them to see this. And maybe there are times where that's appropriate, but when that's done in a healthy way and modeled,
it's the modeling.
That's the modeling. And then, and then there's other steps where you're assisting when they've hurt and wronged one of their siblings.
I've actually watched your whole family model what a healthy family interaction looks like multiple times. I remember actually, so Troy's wife Jenny came from a dysfunctional-ish family like myself, divorce, things like that. And when I came into the family, I looked at her and I thought, is this normal? Right? There's got to be something else going on, right? There's something else behind the scenes that they're putting on a front. They're faking something. And she looked at me and she goes, no, this is actual healthy modeling. This is what it looks like to be a healthy family. And I thought, thank God I have an example, And to your point, that's what our kids crave, right? They want that example.
Yeah.
They want a model to look up to and to follow.
I think we need to err on the side from a perspective standpoint of giving people the grace, whether that's our athletes, our kids, that they don't know. Not that they're doing it wrong because they're choosing to do it wrong, but they don't know how to do it right. And I know I'm super guilty. And what is it that you've said it, and you're better with quotes, Gavin, than I am. You talk about the common sense one. Common sense won't feel like,
oh, your strengths will not feel like strengths. They'll feel like common sense.
Yeah, and I think that we sometimes, I know for sure, and I do this with my kids. My 10-year-old is incredibly intelligent, and I expect almost adult-like behavior out of him, and it's not fair, right? And it's like expecting your employees to know how to do something when you haven't fully onboarded them to do it, or an athlete. Like, we need to err on the side of giving them the benefit of the doubt that they don't truly don't know how to do it. Not that they're just doing it without care.
Yeah.
And I think this can go, we could even tie this all the way back around, Troy and Gavin, to where we talked about pulling kids and pulling our athletes and pulling our family into excellence and pushing them when that's coming from within them. There's an element of not knowing what that looks like, right? So you, Troy, inherently did some of those things in the morning.
Right.
All day, all the way through, right? That was a part of you. 95% won't do that.
Yeah.
But they might if they knew that's what it required. So for me and my athletic background with ski racing, I had an earnest goal to be an Olympic athlete as I was coming through my teenage years. Looking back on it now, I had very little chance of being an Olympic athlete. That wasn't because I lacked the desire or the willingness to do what was required.
Yeah.
It was because I was not informed on what was required. I remember watching, there's a, I want to say it was on Netflix. There was a documentary on Lindsey Vonn. And she was in the twilight of her career, and it was going through her routine. Now, for those of you that don't know, I think Lindsey Vonn's kind of a more common name, household name, but Olympic athlete, one of the top female U.S. alpine skiers of all time. Michaela has now surpassed that just in recent days, but
she has most wins now, right?
Yeah, she has most wins now. But Lindsey Vonn had it for a long time, and I remember watching that and what she would do daily, how many hours she was in the gym, what her snack would be. Her snack would be 12 hard-boiled eggs, that type of thing.
That sounds pretty good.
And she would, no, not when it's every single day. and she would grind through it, eating these eggs and just being like, I hate this.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember watching that and going, I was not doing those things. I wasn't in the gym 8 hours a day. I was not, I didn't have that type of diet. It wasn't because I didn't desire to. I didn't have someone showing me the roadmap on how to get there.
Right.
Modeling it.
Do you, in that thought, do you feel information's not enough? That modeling really is that next level of, I guess, developing greatness? Because we all have the information, right? At this point, nobody can say, I didn't know, right? It's everywhere, right?
It's
If
not
you really
either or.
Yeah. Okay.
It's both.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can know, look, I'm supposed to be in the gym 8 hours a day. But if you're not doing the right things in the gym for those 8 hours a day, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
If you run on the treadmill for 8 hours,
Yeah.
you're not going to get the benefit that you need
With a specialist that knows what they're doing to
That's right.
inform. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's both.
Yeah.
We talk about the importance of coaching a lot.
Yeah.
And modeling is a form of coaching. And in fact, I would argue it's probably the most important form of coaching. And so, to become great at anything, you need a model, a coach, someone in your life that you are looking up to, that's holding, not just delegating responsibility to you, but holding you accountable to it. That's one thing my uncle told me early on. He said, being a great leader has less to do with delegation, more to do with holding people accountable to finishing what they said they would do.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, we're at 48 minutes in. So,
Sheesh.
right? It just goes.
I told you, it just goes.
So, and I absolutely love how this has turned out. You guys know, you've been listening to us. We kind of wing this thing.
Yeah, we
right?
like to.
We sit down, we may have a general vector, and then we just see where it goes. And honestly, the notes that I put down here, we didn't even really, it went a totally, the thought came in, you said something, and we went down, and I love the direction that it went. But as we wrap this up, any parting thoughts, any way to kind of put a bow on this, anything that you've been in the back of your mind is like, oh, I want to make sure I say that before we leave, anything that's resonating or that we haven't touched on?
I would say, in as much as it is important to model and, as the leader, right, and all these things that we've been talking about, I look to both of you as those who have consistently sought out others that are modeling for you as well. So I think that, that might be an important point as well, because sometimes you feel like, okay, I've arrived at a place where like, and frankly, like, that's within my soccer context, that's where I currently find myself. My 9 assistants are amazing, and there's occasionally some new soccer ideas and things, but I'm feeling a stirring to be in a context or to identify ways where I'm seeing others model kind of a next level.
Yes.
So that would be one point that was kind of ruminating. The other is, as it relates to modeling, part of my narrative and story has been, 13 years of going basically from a professional soccer player to having chronic health issues. Sure. Where I've not been able to, in any way, shape, or form, be able to exert, demonstrate, model how I previously would have been able to.
Yeah.
And so where before, because I've coached before that happened, the health issues, and it was always just easy to no, watch, this is how it's done.
Right.
And now, I think this is where maybe the morphing of leadership and finding creative ways, I've had to now figure out, how do I articulate what I'm wanting to get out of a player by way of words, because I cannot do it with my body anymore.
Wow.
And that in some ways has made me, I think, a better coach, to say, I can't just, hey, this is how you do it. I have to find a way to communicate and unlock that in the player.
Love that.
I'll bet you had to use a lot of creativity to do that. Wow.
I mostly show it with watercolor painting.
Takes 3 hours per lesson.
So this is you're painting it, and I love that. That's great.
No, I absolutely love that. And honestly, like, regardless of any sort of health setbacks or anything else, I think we can all learn to be better communicators. Mm-hmm. We can all be better at articulating our thoughts and our wishes from people and all that. So that's great. That was a great takeaway for me, for sure. I think my only finishing thought really is leadership in your own context is totally dependent on who you are as a person. And I would just want to absolutely solidify the idea that leaderships, in my opinion, leaders are made, not born. A lot of people will say, "Oh, he's just a natural born leader." Maybe, but I don't. I think that's pretty rare that somebody just emulates that type of quality. I think people learn how to become leaders, and you can too.
Yeah. I think my final thought is going to be a bit of an exclamation point on what Troy said, and that is continuing to level up yourself as the leader, getting yourself a coach. We talked about that a lot. Is making sure that you're not stagnant. You're either ripening or you're rotting. There is no maintenance level. You're either improving yourself or you're getting passed by somebody that is. And so committing as a leader, as a father, as a coach, to continuing to educate yourself, whether that's getting yourself a coach, whether that's reading books, going to seminars, whatever that needs to look like. And all of those apply and more.
Sure.
But never arriving, always pursuing, and leveling up your own skills.
Yeah, stay curious. Stay curious, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ted.
Stay curious.
Ted Lasso.
Is it?
Yeah.
I really didn't know that.
That did sound like a Ted Lasso. Gotta stay curious, man. This has been awesome.
It has been.
Troy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys found a little nugget that you can take back and deploy with your family or your employees or whatever that might be. It's been great.
Love it.
Until next time.
Company, yeah!
I don't know how to end after that.
We out. Thank you for tuning in to Processing Purpose. We hope you grabbed a few gold nuggets to take one step forward in your journey of life and business. Please remember to like and subscribe our channel if you'd like to get more content to help you build and grow everything around you. Make today your best day. Today is day one.